For those not familiar with the term AWOL, it means absent without leave. While there are many reasons a person will choose to join the military, if you're like me, you did it because you were fed up with working part-time jobs and had no direction in life. That, and my good friend Zach roped me into it because he had also just signed up. It's not like I didn't sort of know this when I signed the enlistment paperwork, but one of the more interesting reality checks after joining the military was finding out that I no longer had the freedom to travel whenever and wherever I wanted, especially when I was still a junior Marine. Unless it was a weekend, and even that wasn't guaranteed, you always had to tell someone where you were going, why you were going, and when you were going to be back. A leave request is basically like submitting a request for time off at work, but if you don't do it in the military, you go to jail. Family emergency? Well, you just hope that your emergency leave request gets approved. But you can't just leave. And yet, some people do. Why? Lots of reasons. Maybe there is something serious going on and they are emotionally overwrought, not thinking rationally. One sailor we knew was apparently just tired of being in the military, so when we ported in Guam, she just went to the airport, caught a flight, and went home. But after some research, it seems that some people have much more interesting reasons for going AWOL. Such as, I don't know, pull from a hat, killing the Antichrist. Listen, I've read a lot of wild stories, but this one might just be the craziest. It's got everything: Ouija boards, demons, ghosts, mind control, UFOs, conspiracy to plot murder, wire fraud, heartbreak, explosions. Okay, there's no explosions, but it's got everything else. This is the true story of 6 U.S. Army soldiers, intel specialists by the way, which I also was, who were tried and convicted of abandoning their post in West Germany to fly to Gulf Breeze, Florida. Their reason? Because a spirit they spoke to through a Ouija board had warned them about the coming apocalypse and had ordered them to find and kill the Antichrist. The military officials who interrogated these men were left as dumbfounded as I am. This is the story of the Gulf Breeze 6. The mist which hangs before you
offers you a choice
to pass through
or to escape.
Beyond it are
Stories
which defy
the explanation
and fly in the face.
of what we know to be real,
It is a void of both
reality
and impossibility.
of both fact
and superstition.
You alone are left to discern
what to believe as you pass through what we call the fog of war.
The story of the Gulf Breeze 6 begins with 2 young Army specialists, 26-year-old Kenneth Beeson and 25-year-old Vance Davis. While these men had what others would call interesting beliefs, they were by all accounts well-trained and capable intelligence specialists in their field. After completing their preliminary MOS training in the late 1980s, both men were assigned to the 731st Military Intelligence Brigade, stationed in Augsburg, West Germany. While there, they were tasked with working at a major NSA listening post near the Soviet border. It's no wonder they became fast friends. Out of all their peers, these 2 young men shared a sincere fascination with all things paranormal, an interest that, for both of them, stretched far back to the days of their adolescence. For Kenneth Beeson, his unexplained experiences began when he was just 5 years old. He woke up one night feeling thirsty, and as if on cue, he said that a ghost came forward, offering him a glass of water. Kenneth would go on to spend his teenage and early adult years reading countless volumes of science fiction, comic books, and books about encounters with spirits and UFOs. His fascination with the supernatural deepened with each passing year. All of this did not go unnoticed by his family. The more books Kenneth read, the more concerned they became. Kenneth was undeniably bright, but he was also said to be woefully gullible. His curious and welcoming attitude was something his family worried would make him susceptible to the influences of others. After he enlisted in the Army, his family's fears were fully realized. During Kenneth's intel training in Pensacola, Florida, he befriended and fell in love with a local woman named Anna Foster. Anna was the owner of a New Age bookshop and referred to herself as a psychic and UFO enthusiast. Her own unrestrained belief in the supernatural greatly encouraged Kenneth's ever-growing fascination with the subject. And then there was Vance Davis. As a teenager, along with the paranormal, he began to develop an interest in various methods of hypnosis. At some point, he enrolled in the Silva mind control courses created by a man named Alex Merklinger, a spiritual guide who also held a reputation as a con man, stemming from his convictions and prison sentencing for wire and mail fraud. Through these mind control courses, Vance told Kenneth that he had mastered the art of self-hypnosis through active imagination, a psychological technique that allows individuals to access their subconscious mind and explore their inner thoughts and emotions. Eventually, Vance's practice of hypnotizing himself would take a very interesting turn. During one of his self-imposed trances, Vance is said to have come face-to-face with a green-skinned alien being who identified herself as Kia. And apparently, Kia had various powers. As he communed with her during one session, Davis claimed that Kia, through some non-physical means, corrected his flat-footedness, something that had bothered him for years, especially after joining the Army when running in boots or standing for long periods in formation. But it wasn't just healing sessions. They spoke for hours. Kia told Kenneth all about her species and about the wider universe. Part of this included telling him about a protective alien group called the Alliance, which was at war with a more hostile coalition of beings known as the Others. Bonded as friends by their shared interests and bizarre paranormal experiences, Kenneth and Vance spent much of their free time researching the subject of the strange and unexplained. After spending their days intercepting and decrypting Soviet radio signals at the post in West Germany, following the evening formation, the two soldiers could often be found in their barracks, carrying on spirited conversations about their personal stories or discussing books and manuscripts that they had been reading. But these more lighthearted activities soon progressed into sincere attempts to begin practicing what they were reading about. Convinced of the existence of something on the other side, Kenneth and Vance wanted to make contact with whatever that was. They attempted communication using a broad array of methods, ranging from guided meditations to the use of tarot cards. While all of this took place privately, eventually a few other like-minded soldiers in their unit fell in with the group. PFC Michael Huckstadt, age 19, PFC Chris Perlock, age 20, PFC William Setterberg, age 20, and even one of their NCOs, Sergeant Annette Eccleston, age 22. As a group, the 6 young soldiers continued making attempts to contact spirits. However, all of their initial methods repeatedly fell short of contacting anything. All of that changed when they decided to pull out a Ouija board. For the group, the board was a last resort. They considered it rather juvenile, the board having a reputation in the late 1980s as a cheap party game. But at this point, they were becoming somewhat desperate to validate their collective beliefs. And it worked. Any ounce of doubt that they had quickly vanished the moment the planchette started moving across the board. Something was responding to their questions. At first, what was being communicated through the board had no overtly religious meaning to it. But during the course of 7 or 8 separate Ouija board sessions, this changed, as the 6 soldiers received messages from at least 7 different spirits. Most of these spirits identified themselves using names corresponding to biblical figures, prophets from the Old Testament like Zechariah, and the names of several of the disciples of Christ, including Mark and Timothy. The group was shocked to eventually be contacted by a spirit claiming to be Mary herself, the mother of Jesus, who was reaching out specifically to the only female in the group, Sergeant Annette Eccleston. The most domineering voice to come through the board, however, wasn't any of the spirits going by a biblical name. It was a mysterious entity that identified itself only as Sapphire.
Well, we got introduced. Basically, she said, and it was a woman. It felt very womanly, I guess, in the way it was moving. A person named Sapphire. And we asked who it was, and she, where she was from. And she basically said she used to be a woman from Georgia, believe it or not. Yeah, so it was someone in the other realm, which had me and both Ken and most of us really spooked, so-called to a dead person.
Over the course of the group's many consecutive Ouija board sessions, Sapphire relayed a terrifying warning to the 6 soldiers, a warning that the world was on the cusp of terrible, apocalyptic events. As they continued to ask the spirit questions, the list of horrifying predictions grew longer and longer, totaling between 80 to 90 prophetic warnings. One of the first predictions was that a major earthquake would occur in Iran, resulting in staggering casualties. Over 300,000 people would be either injured or killed. This would soon be followed by other significant geological disturbances, more devastating earthquakes in Russia and along the west coast of the United States. This would lead to volcanic eruptions and catastrophic weather conditions impacting global geography and climate. Sapphire's predictions also included social and political upheavals, forecasting wars in the Middle East involving the US, Iraq, and Israel. Social unrest and economic collapse in the United States would lead to widespread riots and martial law. Europe would undergo economic and political unification, leading to shifts in global power balances. These events would set the stage for significant shifts in technology and religion, including the revealing of extraterrestrial life and the emergence of a new world order. In the midst of this chaos and global transformation, the Antichrist would appear, a man who would bring about more devastating wars, major religious reform, persecution against all Christians, and immense human suffering. Despite their prodding, the 6 soldiers were unable to obtain a specific identity for this person, Sapphire only telling them that he would emerge out of the smoldering ruins of Europe in the year 1998. The year being significant because mathematically it was 3 times the biblical number 666. Proclaiming himself to be the Messiah, Sapphire went on to say, this person would be hailed as a peacemaker by the masses, including all major religious leaders. In reality, he was of course a wolf in sheep's clothing. But what was the point in them knowing all of this? If the world was about to end, as the Ouija board was telling them, what could 6 low-ranking US Army soldiers do about it? According to Sapphire's messages, these 6 young soldiers did have a part to play. Their psychic connection was no accident. Sapphire told them that they had been chosen by God himself to embark on an urgent and important mission, to prepare for the coming apocalypse and be among the chosen few survivors tasked with guiding humanity towards the light of God in its aftermath. While the soldiers were fairly convinced that they were in direct contact with a divine being, they were initially unsure of what to make of these incredible predictions about the future. That is, until one of the prophecies spelled out on the Ouija board came true.
A powerful earthquake hit Iran early this morning, killing at least 25,000 people, according to the Iranian government, and injuring thousands more. The quake was centered about 200 miles outside Tehran, in a remote mountainous farming region. It measured 7.3 on the Richter scale. Many towns were leveled. Iranian radio said rescue workers had not been able to reach some of the hardest hit villages because the roads are blocked by landslides. The quake was felt in Tehran, but no damage was reported there. The U.S. has offered to send humanitarian aid. It has not yet received a request from Iran.
On June 21, 1990, a magnitude 7.4 earthquake struck in the Caspian Sea region of northern Iran, devastating an area of 20,000 square kilometers or 7,700 square miles. A number of cities and towns, largely composed of unreinforced masonry buildings, were reduced to rubble. Considered one of the world's most devastating earthquakes, it resulted in some 40,000 to 50,000 deaths, another 60,000 more injured, and at least 400,000 people displaced from their homes. While news of the major disaster was broadcast to the world, it's unlikely many people gave it much thought. It was just another bad earthquake. But for the 6 soldiers stationed in Germany, this seemed to be a chilling wake-up call. Outside of the difference in the number of casualties, they were at a complete loss to understand how Sapphire was somehow able to predict this event over a month before it happened, including its geographic location. Having been initially skeptical about all the prophetic messages, this event was apparently all the confirmation they needed to know that the end times were upon them and that God had truly called them into service. The immediate problem was that they were all active duty in the Army. It's not as if they could simply explain their God-given mission to their chain of command and expect to be dismissed from the NSA listening post in West Germany. They needed more guidance. Once again, they turned to the Ouija board, the hand of Sapphire coming through to move the planchette and give them clear instructions on how to proceed. According to Sapphire, the best course of action was for the soldiers to abandon the military, regardless of the consequences, then quickly make their way back to the U.S. From there, the group would retreat into the mountainous regions of the country in order to continue their spiritual development and preparations for the coming disasters. After hearing this, the 6 soldiers found themselves at a bizarre and tense crossroads. What was more important? The oath that they had sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution in defense of their nation, or to protect the entire world in service to God? The choice, it seemed, had already been made. Over the course of the next month, if any of their Army peers or commanders were paying any attention, they might have been concerned about the new and strange behaviors of the 6 soldiers in their unit. Members of the Ouija board group had quietly started selling off personal belongings in an attempt to raise money for their life on the run. Meanwhile, Kenneth Beeson reached out to Anna Foster back in Florida, telling her of their plans and how they would need a safe house to lay low in. It was likely the military would quickly investigate the disappearance of 6 soldiers from an NSA listening post and start looking for them. Without any hesitation, Anna told Kenneth that he and his gang of runaways were welcome to hide out in her home in Gulf Breeze, a small town not too far outside of Pensacola, where all of the soldiers had been stationed during their intelligence training. With that, the final piece of the soldiers' plan to abandon their post in Germany fell into place. They had a destination. On July 9, 1990, using both official and falsified off-base Liberty passes, the soldiers casually walked off of the Augsburg listening post. But rather than remaining in the local area as their leave passes required, they headed to the train station. As they boarded the first train heading for the city of Munich, despite his otherwise unflinching belief in the importance of their God-given mission, Kenneth Beeson felt terrified. While the United States wasn't technically at war with the Soviets, the 2 nuclear rivals were still locked in a tense standoff that threatened to boil over at a moment's notice. His and the other soldiers' collective duties in manning the Augsburg listening post were vital to the West's efforts to intercept and decrypt Soviet radio transmissions, breaking their radio codes, hoping to catch early indications of any offensive nuclear actions. The sheer weight of 6 soldiers with top-secret security clearances abandoning their posts at such a critical time meant the consequences of their actions could be severe. At best, a court-martial followed by a long prison sentence. At worst, well, Kenneth tried to put the thought out of his mind. Finding their seats on the train, Kenneth's stomach turning over at the thought of what would happen if they were ever caught, he reminded himself that there was something far worse looming on the horizon. The end of the world. Hoping to throw off anyone tracking their movements, they chose not to fly directly to Pensacola, Florida, but to Knoxville, Tennessee. Arriving back in the States, a friend of Kenneth Beeson's picked them up at the McGee Tyson Airport in Knoxville. but they needed to get their own wheels. So the group pooled their cash to purchase a vehicle, a rundown 1970s Volkswagen van. Piling inside, they then immediately drove the 400 miles south to Florida. Having spent almost a full day traveling after leaving their post in Germany, by the time the group had landed in Tennessee, their failure to return to base had not gone unnoticed. With their command being unsure of their whereabouts, their official status was considered absent unknown. But if the following investigation determined their absence was voluntary, it would be updated to absent without leave, or AWOL. Considering the sensitive nature of their classified intelligence work, the Army quickly spread the names and faces of the 6 soldiers far and wide, anxious to find them. The initial underlying presumption was that the young soldiers had potentially been taken by a foreign group. Whether their disappearance was involuntary or not, and certainly if they had willingly defected to the Soviets or some other group, the US military could be looking at a major security breach. In short, the sudden disappearance of 6 intelligence personnel raised all kinds of hell. As American and European authorities began searching high and low for them in Germany, Kenneth Beeson and the 5 other runaways were crossing the Pensacola Bridge, entering the city of Gulf Breeze, Florida. Their first stop would be Anna Foster's home. They would spend a few days lying low, gathering supplies, and preparing to drive their van back north to the Appalachian Mountains, where, according to Sapphire's instructions, they would await the coming apocalypse. And here is where their story collides with a very odd coincidence.
Tonight on Hard Copy, there's been a new wave of strange activity in the skies over Gulf Breeze, Florida, and we've got the latest pictures. Doug Bruckner shows us what's going on in the town they call UFO USA.
Here it is. Here's our videotapes. Look at it. You tell us. We don't know, but it's there.
And what appears on those videotapes is a mystery. UFOs hovering as plain as day. Spherical, shiny objects seeming to defy gravity, and then in the blink of an eye, they're gone. But they keep coming back to Gulf Breeze, Florida. It's an affluent community nestled in the Florida Panhandle. Some say the UFOs are attracted to the crystal white sand. Others say it's the sparkling clear waters. Whatever it is, the UFOs are coming in droves.
Why the UFO is coming here, why we witness it so much, I don't know the answers to the why.
Ed Walters makes his living as a housing contractor. But 7 years ago, his life was changed forever when he looked to the sky and saw his first UFO.
I deal with concrete and steel, and UFOs are just something I was never interested in, and until I saw one myself.
And here are those photographs Ed took in 1986.
Whether they knew it at the time or not, the 6 soldiers' arrival into Gulf Breeze, Florida, on a glorified mission to destroy the Antichrist, could not have come at a stranger time. While Gulf Breeze had long been nothing more than a quiet little beach community, in the late 1980s, the town finally became famous. Beginning in 1987 and over the following 2 years, the small Panhandle community played host to hundreds of sightings of supposed extraterrestrial craft and other flying objects. The Gulf Breeze sightings, as they came to be known, became some of the best-known UFO sightings in history,